I turned 18 on a Wednesday. No cake, no candles, just a gift wrapped hastily in brown paper and a plane ticket tucked inside a worn leather wallet. The gift confused me. A fountain pen, old and heavy, with a single line engraved along. It sighed, "To stand alone is to truly fly." Mom smiled thinly when I opened it. Dad checked his watch. They said nothing else. And 20 minutes later, we were driving to the airport. The sky outside was gray, pressing down like a hand on my chest. In the car, they spoke about traffic, about the cost of checked bags, meaningless things, while I sat silent, clutching the pen, feeling the questions swell inside me. At the terminal, they moved briskly. No hugs. Dad thrust a printed boarding pass into my hand. Mom adjusted my jacket like she couldn't quite meet my eyes. Then, a voice behind us. "Ellie, is that you?" It was Mrs. Langford, our old neighbor from 3 streets over. She stood there with a shopping bag in one hand, frozen halfway between a smile and something else, something like pity. "Oh," she said, voice too bright. "All grown up now, I see. Safe travels, dear." I tried to smile back, but she was already glancing at my parents, then quickly away, as if she'd seen something she wished she hadn't. That was the moment I knew, even before the final words were spoken, that something wasn't right. Mom placed a hand briefly on my shoulder. Her fingers were cold. "You'll understand someday," she said, her voice catching, "when you're strong enough to stand alone." And then they were gone. No long farewell, no second glance, just the murmur of strangers wheeling suitcases around me, and the crackling voice of the departure announcements overhead. I stood there, clutching a plane ticket I hadn't asked for, under a flickering departures sign that buzzed like a dying light. The pen felt heavy in my pocket, the engraved words pressing against my skin like a brand. Somewhere deep inside, a small voice whispered, "You're not being sent away for your own good. You're being erased." The silence was the easy part. It was what came after that truly hurt. At first, I thought I had simply been forgotten. A busy family swept up in their lives, too distracted to pick up a phone. But then came the whispers. It started with a postcard. From a distant cousin, a cheery note scribbled with forced excitement. "So proud of you, Ellie. I heard you're living in Paris now, living your dream." Paris? I was barely affording instant noodles in a crumbling studio apartment downtown. Then, a former Sunday school teacher emailed congratulations about choosing ambition over obligations. A line so loaded it knocked the air out of me. The narrative took shape faster than I could stop it. In my parents' version of the story, I hadn't been abandoned. No, I had abandoned them. They told everyone I had landed a prestigious scholarship overseas, that I was too busy, too important, to stay in touch with the simple family who had given me everything. That I had chosen to walk away. The photos came next. Family albums posted online, smiling birthdays, sparkling Christmases, all featuring captions like, "Proud of our son, who never forgets where he comes from." There was no empty chair at the table, no missing face, no whispered grief. In their carefully curated world, I hadn't just vanished. I had been rewritten into a parable, a cautionary tale of pride and abandonment. Sometimes strangers would message me, asking why I'd turned my back on such good people. Each note another stone quietly stacked on my chest. I realized then, it wasn't enough for them to erase me. They needed the world to think they had never failed at all. The first real crack came a year later, at a funeral. A second cousin, someone I barely remembered, passed away. The service was small, gray, heavy with rain and regret. I almost didn't go. But something pulled me there, a stubborn, aching curiosity. I stood near the back, invisible among faces I used to know, listening to polite condolences and the low hum of grief. That's when I heard it. 2 rows ahead, a woman I vaguely recognized, Mrs. Draper, a friend of my mother's, leaned close to another mourner and whispered, "Such a shame about Ellie Harris. Her poor parents. She turned her back on them after they sacrificed everything. Paris will change a girl, I suppose." Paris. Again, the lie had rooted so deep it had become truth to everyone but me. Later, outside by the dripping hedges, I approached. Mrs. Draper. She didn't recognize me at first, or maybe she pretended not to. When I introduced myself, her face stiffened. She muttered something about how my parents missed me terribly, how they were heartbroken by my choices. I thanked her quietly and left. That night, I dug through old emails, old saved voicemails, anything that might give me a thread to pull. And that's when I found it. A deleted draft in an ancient email account I'd barely used. It had been sent from my father's address, never delivered. It read simply, "Scholarship application enclosed. Request immediate processing. Candidate, Eleanor Harris. Program, International Honors Fellowship, Paris." Except I had never applied to any fellowship, never even heard of it. The document attached was a full scholarship application, fabricated, padded with fake awards, fake letters of recommendation. My parents had invented a new version of me, polished, ambitious, ungrateful. A better story. And they'd sold it to everyone who mattered. I stared at the screen, the room around me blurring, my hands cold. They hadn't just erased me, they had replaced me. The more I dug, the more the story soured. Hidden among forgotten files and old newspaper clippings, I pieced together the truth. It wasn't just a matter of pride or wounded feelings. It was money. It was always money. My father's small logistics company had been flailing for years, bleeding contracts to bigger competitors. Debt had crept into every corner of their lives. Second mortgages, unpaid suppliers, quiet defaults. They needed something, someone, to restore their standing, to convince investors they were still a family worth betting on. The scholarship story wasn't an accident. It was a strategy. A daughter studying abroad at an elite university sounded impressive on paper, impressive enough to be printed in annual reports, whispered at country club dinners, flaunted in loan applications. Investors didn't want struggling businesses tied to struggling families. They wanted polished narratives, clean successes. And me? I didn't fit the image anymore. A literature major with no connections, no clear path to wealth or prestige, living paycheck to paycheck in a crumbling city apartment. I had become a liability, so they wrote me out, crafted a new Ellie, a better Ellie, and built a future on that foundation of lies. Even my brother's supposed rise in aviation wasn't what it seemed. His certifications were basic, his employment spotty. The polished photos he posted beside private planes? Rentals. Airfields borrowed for an hour to stage the right shot. It was all an illusion, a fragile scaffolding propped up by desperate ambition. Maybe, in some twisted way, my parents believed they were saving me too, pushing me out so I could toughen up, survive without dragging the family down. But survival isn't strength when it's forced at the barrel of betrayal, and ambition built on erasure doesn't make you noble. It makes you a coward. I didn't have a grand plan at first. I had a cheap laptop, a used uniform, and a job at the bottom rung of a struggling regional airline. My days were swallowed by delayed flights and angry customers, my nights by exhaustion too heavy to dream. But survival sharpens you. Scrubbing bathroom floors and rerouting luggage for minimum wage taught me more about ambition than any classroom ever could. Some nights, sitting on plastic chairs under humming fluorescent lights, I replayed their narrative over and over in my head. The daughter who abandoned them, the golden son who soared. It would have been easy to drown in bitterness, easier still to waste my life proving them wrong. I chose something harder. I started listening. At the gates, in the break rooms, in the cramped cockpits, I listened to stories. Stories of pilots ground down by impossible hours, mechanics who patched planes with prayers because budgets were tight, single mothers trying to hold families together on wages that barely covered rent. I listened, and I learned the language of an industry that had forgotten its people. Slowly, I began to climb. Front desk agent, shift supervisor, assistant to the regional manager. Each promotion brought more hours, more pressure, but also more access to documents, to audits, to the fragile veins of the airline's finances. One winter night, I stayed late filing paperwork and met a man named Robert Langston, a senior Dow, executive passing through town. We spoke over burnt coffee about lost luggage, bad weather, the quiet desperation at the heart of smaller airlines. I must have said something that caught his attention, because a week later, he called me personally, offering mentorship. I didn't ask why. I just said yes. Mistakes still happened. I trusted the wrong people more than once. I gambled on a business partnership that drained my savings to the last dollar. I spent a year clawing my way back from that failure, quieter, sharper, less willing to believe in easy promises. Over time, my motivation shifted. It was no longer about proving my family wrong. It wasn't even about revenge. It was about building something no one could erase, not with a whisper, not with a lie, not with 1,000 perfect family photos. If they needed a fiction to survive, fine. I would build a truth too big for them to outrun. By the time I was ready to return, the performance was already in full swing. From the outside, my family looked untouchable, hosting charity galas at rented venues, attending aviation conferences as honored guests, giving speeches about perseverance and legacy. Their photos flooded social media again, champagne flutes raised, matching navy suits, my brother grinning from private jets he didn't own. Behind closed doors, the truth festered. The company was bleeding under the weight of bad loans and missed payments. My father's health had faltered. My mother clung tighter to appearances, spending money they didn't have to maintain the illusion. The family trust fund, once whispered about with pride, was a hollow shell, mortgaged against favors and promises that were slowly collapsing. Friends whispered when they thought no one could hear. Investors grew restless. Clients hesitated, but still, the parties continued. Carefully staged photos, polished press releases, staged interviews filled with references to family values and shared dreams. Every event was a desperate attempt to rewrite the narrative again, to sell the story they had chosen, the one without me in it. At a spring gala, my brother stood before a crowded room and spoke about overcoming obstacles. I wasn't there, but I saw the footage later, the shaky smile, the tight grip on the microphone. He thanked our parents for believing in him, called them the roots of his success. Not a word about the sacrifices they hadn't made. Not a word about the debts they were drowning under. Only the script they needed everyone else to believe. The applause was polite. Some faces in the crowd looked genuinely moved. Others, the ones who knew better, offered only tight smiles and sidelong glances. Watching it all unfold from a distance, I didn't feel anger anymore. Not pity either. Just certainty. The stage was set. The players were in costume. The audience was ready. All that remained was for the truth to walk in, uninvited. The gala was held at a hotel just outside the city, a sprawling glass monument to ambition and borrowed wealth. Invitations had been sent to every major investor, every client they could still impress, every name that mattered in the small but interconnected world of regional aviation. It was supposed to be a celebration, a recommitment to shared family values and bold futures. They didn't know I was coming. I didn't arrive with fanfare. No red carpet, no grand entrance, just a name on the acquisition documents filed. That morning, discreetly delivered to the board of directors by my attorney. Langston had helped me piece together the final move. A quiet merger, a transfer of shares orchestrated over months, absorbing the crumbling shell of my father's company into the airline network I had helped rebuild. I stepped into the ballroom as the speeches began. No one noticed at first. I was just another guest in a dark dress standing by the back wall, hands clasped loosely at my waist. From the stage, my brother spoke, voice tight with rehearsed enthusiasm, thanking visionary investors and loyal family partners. My mother smiled in the front row, rigid and radiant, clutching my father's arm with white-knuckled pride. When they called for the new executive partners to be recognized, there was a pause, confused glances, a ripple through the crowd. Then, my name was announced, not Eleanor the abandoned, not Ellie the ungrateful, just Eleanor Harris, majority shareholder. I walked forward through the stunned silence, my heels clicking softly against the marble floor. Cameras flashed instinctively, but no one applauded. My father's face drained of color. My mother's smile froze, brittle and breaking. My brother shifted in place, his expression flickering somewhere between rage and disbelief. I didn't speak. I didn't bow, I simply took my place at the table, and for the first time in years, they had to see me. Not the version they invented, not the ghost they buried, but the woman they had tried so hard to erase and failed. The room held its breath. I stood there, letting the silence stretch until it grew heavier than applause could have ever been. Then, without ceremony, I stepped to the podium. The microphone hissed softly as I adjusted it, my movements unhurried, deliberate. "Thank you for joining us tonight," I said. My voice was calm, steady, almost gentle. "Before we proceed, there's one more story worth telling." I nodded toward the projection screen behind me. The lights dimmed, and the first image appeared, not glossy promotional photos, not polished family portraits. A security camera still frame, a teenage girl standing alone in an airport terminal, clutching a suitcase and a boarding pass, under a flickering departure sign. Her face blurred by low resolution, but unmistakably mine. A few guests shifted uncomfortably. Then came snippets of documents, loan agreements signed in desperation, fake scholarship applications filed under my name, promotional materials boasting about a daughter studying abroad, fabricated to impress lenders. Piece by piece, the story unfolded. Quiet, undeniable, I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I simply narrated, laying out the truth with clinical precision. The debts hidden behind glittering galas, the trust fund already drained, the performances staged to buy time and pity. The final image lingered longer, a ledger showing the official transfer of ownership. My name at the top. I turned back to the crowd, the silence now thick enough to drown in. "My parents taught me many things," I said. "Some lessons were intentional, some not. Tonight, I thank them for both." I stepped down from the stage without waiting for applause. None came. My mother stared at the floor, motionless. My father's hands trembled in his lap. My brother sat stiff and pale, his lips pressed into a thin, bitter line. Around them, the guests, those who had once smiled so easily, now looked everywhere but at the family they had come to celebrate. The narrative they had built so carefully had shattered in a matter of minutes, not with anger, not with spectacle, just with truth. I didn't stay for the rest of the gala. While murmured excuses filled the air and polite chaos rippled through the ballroom, I slipped away through a side exit, leaving behind the clinking glasses, the forced smiles, the brittle legacy collapsing in on itself. Outside, the night was crisp, the sky clear and endless. I walked across the quiet parking lot, heels clicking softly against the pavement, the cool air sharp and clean in my lungs. I wasn't angry, I wasn't triumphant. I felt free. At the edge of the lot, near the valet stand, I caught a glimpse of a familiar figure. It was my brother. He didn't call out. He didn't move closer. He just stood there, hands shoved deep into his pockets, staring at me like he wanted to say something but didn't know how. For a long moment, we simply looked at each other, two strangers stitched together by blood and broken history. I gave a small nod, not of forgiveness, not of reconciliation, just acknowledgement. He didn't return it. I turned away first, as I opened the car door, my phone buzzed once in my pocket. A missed call. Mom. No voicemail. No text. Just the echo of a number that used to mean home. I slid the phone back without answering. Some ghosts are better left unanswered. As I drove away, the lights of the ballroom faded behind me, shrinking into nothing. Ahead, the highway stretched, wide and open under the stars. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't chasing anything either. I had nothing to prove, no one to impress, no debt left to pay, just a quiet life ahead, and the simple, stubborn truth that had carried me this far. Some stories aren't rewritten, some people aren't erased, some flights once taken never land the same again.